My name is Haley Monroe, I'm 29, and the night my husband told me to stop crying about your dad's cancer, you're ruining my Vegas vibe, something inside me stopped too. He sat across the dinner table, phone light reflecting off his glass of champagne, pretending not to notice the tremor in my hands. Haley, lighten up, he said. You've been such a buzzkill lately. I looked at him, the man I once thought was my shelter, and realized he'd become the storm. Do you ever hear a sentence so cruel it rearranges who you are? The steak between us had gone cold. My eyes stung. My father's voice, faint through the hospital line that morning, still echoed, "Stay brave, sweetheart. Don't let anyone dim you." I had clung to those words all day like a lifeline, but sitting there watching my husband raise his glass to himself, I knew I'd married someone who didn't understand love, only convenience. He scrolled through his phone, chuckling, "Babe, can you believe our suite in Vegas has a mirror above the bed? It's going to be legendary." Legendary. Meanwhile, my dad lay attached to tubes, fading. I whispered, "You didn't even ask about him." He shrugged. "What good would that do? I'm trying not to think about death before our trip." His voice was casual, like discussing weather. My heart fractured so quietly it almost sounded polite. That's when a strange calm found me, a silence sharper than anger. While he hummed Viva Las Vegas and folded shirts into his suitcase, I memorized everything. His tone, his indifference, the soft rhythm of betrayal that filled the room. At midnight, when he finally fell asleep, I stood by the window. The city lights below looked like stars that forgot how to feel. My reflection stared back, hollow but alive. I opened my phone. 3 cancellations. 1 freeze on a credit card. And a quiet message to the locksmith for mourning. He dreamed of Vegas. I dreamed of peace. By dawn, one of us would wake to freedom. And it wouldn't be him. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains like an uninvited truth. He was still asleep, mouth slightly open, unaware that his world had already been edited. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, flight reminder, 3 hours until Vegas. I turned it face down, letting it buzz itself into silence. He stirred. "Hey babe, did you pack my charger?" I smiled softly. "No, but you'll find everything you need." He didn't notice the weight of that sentence. They never do. While he showered, I walked into the kitchen, every sound amplified. The kettle hissing, the fridge humming, the clock ticking like a countdown. I opened my banking app and confirmed the freeze. His name blinked red, transaction blocked. Then the airline confirmation appeared, booking cancelled by account holder. My hands trembled, but not from guilt. From something better, power. He came out wearing his travel jacket, cologne clouding the air. "Why are you dressed like you're staying home?" he asked, smirking. "I am." "What?" "Enjoy your solo trip." He laughed, thinking it was a joke. Then his card declined at the door. "Haley, my card's not working." "That's strange," I said, sipping coffee. "Maybe try another one?" He frowned, dialed his bank, confusion turning to panic. When he rushed outside to catch his cab, I quietly locked the door behind him and leaned against it, feeling the click echo through my bones. Minutes later his call came. "Haley, they won't let me board. They said payments declined. What did you do?" I could hear the chaos behind him. Boarding announcements, people laughing, his breath quickening. "I'm just giving you what you wanted," I said calmly. "A vibe." He shouted my name, but I hung up. Outside, the wind shifted. Inside, I exhaled. My father's message appeared on my phone. "Results are in. Come soon." I whispered to the empty house, "I'm on my way, Dad." As his frantic texts filled the screen, I watched each one disappear beneath the words. Message blocked. He wanted Vegas. I chose reality. By the time he realized I'd changed the locks, the world outside my window had already gone quiet. The morning haze clung to the street like it was holding its breath. My phone kept vibrating, 32 missed calls, 15 voice notes, each one more desperate than the last. "Haley, open the door." "This isn't funny." "Then, you're overreacting." "It was just a joke." And finally, the one that made me laugh. A bitter, trembling laugh I didn't recognize. "Fine. I'll just stay at a hotel." "You'll regret this." No, I thought. I'd been regretting him for years. I packed my small overnight bag, not for escape but for peace. My father's hospital room was waiting. I hadn't seen him in days, too busy orbiting a man who thought my sadness was inconvenient. When I arrived, Dad was awake, frail but glowing in that quiet, steady way only the dying can. "Haley," he whispered, voice soft but sure, "you look lighter." I smiled. "I made some changes." He squeezed my hand weakly. "Then keep going." Outside, my husband's texts kept pouring in, a storm against glass. "You're humiliating me. Where's my wallet? They won't let me check in. Haley, please, I'm stranded." The last one read, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that about your dad." I stared at it for a long time. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he didn't. But apologies after consequences always taste like survival, not sincerity. That night I stayed beside my father's bed. Machines beeped softly. His breathing slowed like a lullaby. I told him stories from my childhood. How he taught me to ride a bike, how he said love means showing up when it's hardest. And when he smiled faintly before drifting off, I knew he'd be proud. Because for the first time in years I'd finally shown up, for myself. My husband's final voicemail that night began with a sob. "Haley, please, they're closing the gate." I pressed delete. And whispered, "Goodbye, Vegas." I woke up the next morning in the hospital chair, the scent of disinfectant mixing with the faint hum of heart monitors. My father was still asleep, his chest rising slowly beneath the pale blanket. Outside, sunlight painted the linoleum floor gold, and for a moment, everything was calm. Then my phone buzzed again, 30 new messages. All from him. "Haley, you went too far. I can't get a new card until Monday. Do you understand what you've done to me?" Each one sounded less like remorse and more like a man grieving his control. I muted the phone and turned toward my dad. His hand was cold but steady in mine. "He's not your home, sweetheart," he murmured without opening his eyes. "You were your own home all along." Those words settled inside me like a key turning in a lock. By noon I stepped outside to grab coffee. The wind was cool, the sky impossibly blue. For the first time in months, my shoulders didn't ache from pretending to be fine. I watched people rushing to their lives, carrying flowers, files, and mourning plans. And I thought, that's what love is supposed to look like. Movement. Care. Effort. When I returned, my father was awake, smiling faintly. "You look lighter again," he said. "I canceled Vegas," I admitted. He laughed softly, a sound that cracked my heart. "Good. I never liked gambling." "Neither did I," I whispered. "But I married one." That night I checked my husband's social media. He had posted a photo of the airport bar, captioned, "When your wife loses her mind mid-trip." Hundreds of laughing emojis below it. I felt anger rise, but not the wild kind. It was quiet, focused, cold. He thought humiliation was a game. I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and began typing an email, not to him but to his employer. I attached screenshots, receipts, and every proof of the company funds he'd used for personal pleasure. He wanted attention. I was about to give him a spotlight he'd never forget. By morning the email was gone, sent, sealed, irreversible. A strange calm followed. Like the hush after thunder. My father was still asleep, and I watched the first drip of sunlight touch his blanket. There was peace in the stillness. I made a silent promise that every tear I'd wasted on my husband would now water something worth growing. Around noon my phone rang. The caller ID flashed his name. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. I answered. "Haley, what did you do?" His voice trembled between anger and panic. "What do you mean?" I asked, feigning innocence. "They called me into HR. They said I'd misused company money, Vegas bookings, shopping, dinners. You sent them everything, didn't you?" I stayed quiet. The silence stretched, thick and unbearable. "Haley, please," he begged. "You're ruining my life." I closed my eyes. "You ruined mine the day you mocked my father's cancer." The line went dead. Minutes later he texted, "I'm suspended." Then another, "You'll regret this." And one final one, "I didn't mean it that way." I didn't reply. Some apologies are just people trying to breathe while their world collapses. That evening, Dad opened his eyes and whispered, "You look like your mother did when she finally left." I smiled faintly. Was she scared? He shook his head. She was free. Outside, the sunset bled gold and orange across the horizon. I scrolled through my husband's social feed. Posts deleted, comments turned off. He was unraveling in real time, and I didn't even need to lift a finger anymore. Then came the voicemail. "Haley, please, I can't get into the house. The landlord says the locks were changed." Can I at least come for my things? I listened until the end, then deleted it like a prayer. For the first time in years, dinner tasted like peace, soup and silence. And that night, when I kissed my father's forehead, he smiled in his sleep as if he knew I was done crying. 3 days passed before I heard from him again. By then, the quiet in my apartment had turned into something sacred. No shouting. No footsteps pacing. No constant requests disguised as love. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of my own breathing. He called from a different number this time. Haley, please just talk to me. I almost hung up, but curiosity made me listen. I don't have access to my accounts, he said, voice trembling. HR froze everything until the investigation ends. I'm staying with a friend. Can I come home? I'll fix things. The word home hit me like a ghost. You mean the place where I cried alone while you planned Vegas? Silence. Then a broken whisper. I didn't know how to handle your sadness. I laughed quietly. You handled it by mocking it. Haley, I made a mistake. No, I said softly. You made a choice. When I ended the call, my hands were steady. I didn't feel triumph, just a strange, quiet clarity. Revenge wasn't loud. It was peace that stayed after the noise was gone. That night, I sat beside my father again. He was weaker now, his breaths shorter, but his eyes bright with recognition. I'm proud of you, he said. For what? For choosing yourself. Tears burned behind my eyes, but this time they didn't fall. I wish you'd live long enough to see me actually free. He smiled faintly. I already have. Hours later, while he slept, I received another message from my husband. A picture of our old wedding photo. Remember this? We were happy once. I stared at it for a long time, then typed back one line. We were pretending once. And for the first time, I meant it without bitterness. The next morning, the hospital corridor smelled like rain and bleach. My father's heartbeat on the monitor was faint but steady. I held his hand, knowing some goodbyes don't come with closure. Just quiet understanding. Somewhere in the distance, my phone buzzed again. I didn't even look. The next morning, the world seemed gentler. The sky outside the hospital window was pale blue, the kind that almost forgives. My father was still asleep, his breaths shallow, his skin warm. I sat beside him, fingers tracing the rhythm of the heart monitor, trying to memorize every sound. Then came another message. This time from an unknown number, but I knew the tone. I'm outside your building. Please, Haley, just 5 minutes. I stared at the screen. My chest didn't tighten like it used to. There was no panic, no fear, just the quiet disbelief that he still thought he had a right to my time. I replied, Dad's in the hospital. I have no minutes left for you. He wrote back, I didn't mean what I said. I was stressed. It was a bad joke. A bad joke. My father dying was a punchline to him. When I stepped out for air later, the parking lot shimmered under the afternoon heat. I spotted him across the street. Rumpled shirt, eyes red, desperation written all over him. He looked like a man who'd misplaced his reflection. Haley, he called out. Can we talk? I crossed my arms. About what? Vegas? My dad? Or your job suspension? His lips quivered. Please, I need another chance. I studied him. The man who once told me love was about patience, then couldn't handle mine. I forgave you already, I said quietly. His eyes flickered with hope. But forgiveness doesn't mean return. He reached forward, but I stepped back. The distance between us finally matched the one he'd created long ago. At that moment, a nurse called from inside. Haley, your father's awake again. I turned without another word and walked away. He shouted something I didn't catch. Maybe my name, maybe regret. But the sound faded under the hospital's automatic doors. Inside, Dad whispered weakly, You okay? I nodded, holding his hand. I think I finally am. Outside, the man who once mocked my grief stood alone, facing his own reflection on the glass. The night my father passed, the rain returned. It tapped softly against the hospital windows, like it was trying to tell me something gentle. I sat beside him, holding his hand until the last warmth left it. He left the world the same way he lived in it, quietly with grace. When I walked out of the hospital, my husband was waiting near the entrance. He looked smaller somehow, soaked, shivering, eyes swollen. Haley, he said, voice breaking. I heard about your dad. I'm sorry. I really am. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. Only distance. I know, I said. But it doesn't change anything. He stepped closer, desperate. We can fix this. We were good once. Remember? I met his eyes. We were never good. I was just good at forgiving. He stood there, speechless, his apology lost between raindrops. I didn't need to raise my voice. Silence had already spoken louder than any scream ever could. When I reached home later, everything smelled like peace. Lavender candles, clean sheets, the hum of my father's old record player spinning faint jazz. On the table sat his note in shaky handwriting. Love doesn't shrink you, Haley. It expands you. Don't settle for small. I pressed the paper to my heart, tears falling without pain. My husband called one last time. I answered, not to reopen wounds but to close them properly. I just wanted to say, I whispered, thank you. For what? He asked, confused. For teaching me what love isn't. And then I ended the call, for the final time. Days later, his company terminated him officially. The HR letter found its way into his new rental mailbox. I didn't need to see his reaction. Some lessons are best learned in private. Now I visit my father's grave every Sunday. I bring sunflowers, his favorite. I sit under the same sky and breathe easily because the world no longer feels heavy. He wanted Vegas. I found peace. And that, finally, was the best revenge of all.